When John Edmonds and his wife Joyce moved into Stardust Ranch, they were looking forward to a quiet life running a horse rescue. But what they got was anything but peaceful. From the day they arrived, John reported a string of bizarre incidents: unseen forces moving objects, glowing orbs in the sky, and even violent encounters with beings he believed were aliens. Things took a terrifying turn when he claimed to fend off abduction attempts on his wife and fought back with a samurai sword, leaving what he described as alien blood behind. For over 2 decades, the ranch has been at the center of one of the most unsettling and controversial paranormal stories ever told. When John and Joyce Edmonds first came across Stardust Ranch in 1995, it seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start. Life had been anything but easy for them. Joyce, an FBI employee, had recently been through a grueling battle with cancer, and she needed space to heal, physically and emotionally. John, on the other hand, had spent years in the healthcare field and wanted to build a sanctuary where they could escape the stress of their daily lives. The ranch checked all the boxes. It was quiet, tucked away in Rainbow Valley, Arizona, with wide open spaces and endless skies. For Joyce, it felt like the perfect environment to recover. For John, it was an opportunity to fulfill his dream of running a horse rescue. The couple envisioned peaceful days spent caring for animals. Their daily lives revolved around hard work and care. Mornings started with feeding and tending to the horses they were rescuing. Afternoons were filled with maintaining the property, fixing fences, managing supplies, and ensuring their ranch stayed in good shape. They were dedicated to their animals, but they also found time to sit together on the porch, watching the Arizona sunsets. It was a life they could both see themselves settling into. But that dream of peace and stability didn't last long. From the very beginning, strange things began to happen. There were certain details that didn't sit right with them. Like how the previous owner had abruptly left, abandoning furniture and belongings, as if fleeing something. At first, they brushed it off, focusing on the positives. But as time went on, strange things began to intrude on their daily lives in ways they couldn't ignore. What started as an escape from life's difficulties turned into something they could have never expected. John even said this:
"Almost immediately from the day we moved in, we began to have strange experiences.
It started with small, odd noises at night, items disappearing, or being moved without explanation. At first, John dismissed it as part of getting used to a new place. At the time, he thought maybe it was animals, or maybe their imaginations were playing tricks on them. But then, the incidents began to escalate. One of the first chilling moments came when John found their horses acting strangely. The animals had become frantic, pacing and refusing to enter certain parts of the property. And then, one morning, he discovered a gruesome sight. One of his horses had deep, precise cuts on its body, almost like surgical wounds. There was no sign of a predator, no struggle, and no logical explanation. John couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. But the real turning point came one night when John heard something outside their home. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped into the yard to investigate. What he saw froze him in place. Hovering above the ranch were strange lights, bright, silent, and unlike anything he'd ever seen before. They darted across the sky, moving in ways that no aircraft could. This was definitely not a plane, and no jet could move this freely through space. So what was this strange aircraft? He had no answers. Joyce later described seeing similar lights, but her own encounters didn't stop there. She often felt an overwhelming sense of being watched, even when she was alone inside the house. Windows would rattle for no reason, and the family dogs barked endlessly at seemingly nothing. But here's where things start to get even more complicated. John began claiming that these lights weren't just passing by, they were connected to something much darker. According to him, he encountered beings he described as greys, small humanoid creatures with large eyes and elongated limbs. These weren't just quick encounters either. John claimed to have fought these beings, even going as far as to say he killed several of them with a samurai sword he kept in the house. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like the plot of a sci-fi thriller. But John really did claim to kill these creatures. Why a samurai sword and not a shotgun? Well, some mysteries I don't have the answers to just yet. For instance, many of you are still not subscribed to the channel. It just takes a second to hit the button. Thanks. Anyways, back to the sword killing stuff. The events at Stardust Ranch didn't just stop with strange creatures or mysterious lights. Now, you'll have to take this bit with a grain of salt, but John spoke of portals opening on the property, describing rips in space and time where he could see other places, even other worlds. He also described watching objects disappear into these portals, only to reappear somewhere else entirely. And then there were the shadow people. Both John and Joyce reported seeing dark, human-like figures lurking in their home. These entities didn't behave like ordinary intruders. They would vanish the moment you turned on a light or tried to get a closer look. All of this left the Edmonds trapped in a constant state of fear. Then they tried everything, calling in priests, reaching out to paranormal investigators, and even trying to sell the property for $5 million. Unfortunately, nothing seemed to help. The strange occurrences continued, and potential buyers always backed out after spending time on the ranch. One investigator who visited the property claimed they recorded unexplained electromagnetic activity. Others described feeling physically ill after spending just a few hours there, reporting nausea, headaches, and an overwhelming sense of dread. For John, the breaking point came when he claimed the entities started targeting Joyce. Months after they moved in, Joyce Edmonds began experiencing unexplained injuries, bruises, scratches, and even burns that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Then they targeted John as well. Here's a photo he took of that.
Actually levitated her out of the bed in the master chamber, out into the parking lot, and tried to draw her up into a craft.
Other times, they couldn't account for lost time, which is very prevalent to people who were attacked or abducted. In such, a man named Travis Walton described similar experiences of time loss in Arizona. Precisely 2 decades ago, Travis Walton, whose 1975 abduction remains one of the most documented UFO cases in history, described a similar disconnect with time during his encounter with the Greys. After being struck by a beam of lightning from a hovering craft, Walton disappeared for 5 days. When he was found, he had no clear memory of where he had been or how much time had passed. This time loss wasn't just personal. His logging crew had also witnessed the craft and its strange behavior. What makes Walton's experience relevant here is how both he and John's family reported physical and psychological after effects. Walton described dizziness and confusion upon his return, while John and Joyce claimed they felt a persistent sense of disorientation, almost as if their perception of reality had been tampered with. Walton's story also included moments of intense light and sound, sensory overloads that seemed designed to overwhelm, and even some other injuries that can't be explained, just like the unexplained injuries Joyce and John suffered. I went into great detail talking about Travis Walton in this video, and there's a link in the description for you to watch if you want to know more about his situation. Joyce believed the things were trying to manipulate or control her, and the thought was terrifying. John, feeling powerless against these invisible forces, became increasingly desperate. He described staying awake through the night, armed with his sword, ready to defend his wife and their home from what he believed were otherworldly invaders. But it wasn't just the physical attacks that shook the couple. Joyce spoke of vivid nightmares, dreams that felt too real to dismiss. In these dreams, she would find herself aboard strange crafts, surrounded by beings she couldn't communicate with. She would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart racing, totally convinced it wasn't just her mind playing tricks on her. John, on the other hand, became more vocal about his theories. He believed the ranch was sitting on some kind of interdimensional hotspot, a place where the barriers between worlds were unusually thin. He claimed the beings were using the ranch as a gateway, slipping in and out of our reality as they pleased. What's even stranger is how consistent these reports were. Visitors to the ranch, completely unaware of the Edmonds' experiences, often left with their own chilling stories. Some claimed to see strange lights in the sky. Others described a heavy atmosphere that seemed to weigh them down the moment they stepped onto the property. One guest, a family friend, recounted seeing a figure in the distance while out on the ranch one evening. Thinking it was John, they called out, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it simply dissolved into the air, leaving them shaken and unsure of what they had just witnessed. The more the Edmonds shared their experiences, the more divided opinions became. On one side, you had people who believed their every word, paranormal enthusiasts, UFO researchers, and even some scientists who thought there could be something to their claims. On the other side, skeptics dismissed it all as attention-seeking, or even delusions brought on by the isolation of desert life. But whether you believe their story or not, one thing is certain. Stardust Ranch has left a mark on anyone who's encountered its mysteries. And this brings us to the theories. What could possibly explain everything that's been reported on Stardust Ranch? When it comes to explaining the bizarre events at Stardust Ranch, theories range from realistic to "I'm not so sure about this." Let's start with the one you might not like too well, but John Edmonds himself believed most strongly. Number 1. The interdimensional portal theory. John often described the ranch as a kind of cosmic crossroads. He believed Stardust Ranch sat on a portal, a gateway between dimensions where beings from other realities could slip into our world. He pointed to the strange lights in the sky and the shadowy figures as evidence, claiming they were travelers from another dimension. The idea of interdimensional portals might sound far-fetched, but it's not entirely new in the world of paranormal research. Places like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah have similar reputations, with witnesses reporting portals and otherworldly visitors. Some researchers speculate that certain locations on Earth may have unique energy fields or geomagnetic properties that create these rifts. Sedona, Arizona, only a few hours from Stardust Ranch, is famous for its vortexes, areas believed to be swirling centers of spiritual or electromagnetic energy. Perhaps Stardust Ranch has its own unique energy that draws these beings in. Number 2. Extraterrestrial experiment. Another popular theory is that Stardust Ranch is part of an extraterrestrial experiment. Supporters of this idea point to the encounters with Greys, the classic alien archetype, and the injuries Joyce reportedly suffered. John claimed the beings weren't just observing humans, but actively experimenting on them. This ties into a broader occurrence often found in UFO stories, aliens conducting genetic experiments or studying human behavior. And it's not just the Edmonds who've reported these kinds of encounters. Across the globe, thousands of people have described eerily similar experiences, from abductions to unexplained medical marks. Number 3. Government involvement. Then there's the theory that Stardust Ranch's mysteries aren't alien at all, but human-made. Some believe the US government has been conducting secret experiments on the property, perhaps involving advanced technology or even psychological operations. The isolated location of the ranch makes it an ideal testing ground. Witnesses have reported seeing unmarked helicopters flying low over the property, and John himself claimed he was harassed by mysterious agents who warned him not to dig too deeply into what was happening on the ranch. Could the lights in the sky and the strange occurrences be part of a classified project? It wouldn't be the first time the government has been accused of covering up activities linked to UFOs or advanced technology. Of course, it's possible that the truth lies somewhere in between these theories. Perhaps the ranch does have unusual energy that affects people in unpredictable ways, creating a mix of real and imagined experiences. Or maybe it's a combination of things, like personal stress and external influence, that has created the perfect storm for a mystery that continues to leave people in awe to this day. Regardless of which theory you lean toward, Stardust Ranch remains one of the strangest places in the world of paranormal lore. But not everyone is convinced. Now, let's look at the critics and why they believe there's more myth than mystery at Stardust Ranch. Firstly, the most skeptical theory is that Stardust Ranch's mysteries can be explained by the power of suggestion. Critics argue that living in isolation, coupled with the ranch's dark atmosphere, might have amplified John and Joyce's fears. Once strange events began, their minds could have connected the dots in ways that seemed logical to them, but may not hold up to scrutiny. This theory also suggests that visitors to the ranch, already aware of its reputation, might subconsciously expect to experience something unusual. Psychologists refer to this as the expectation effect, where what you anticipate seeing can influence what you actually perceive. Sure, John Edmonds has told his story many times, but where's the proof? The doubters argue that for all the claims of alien battles, mysterious lights, and even interdimensional portals, there's not a single clear photo or video to back it up. Now you might be thinking, what about the investigators who reported electromagnetic activity? Well, they have an answer for that too: electromagnetic fluctuations. Turns out, these fluctuations are pretty common in areas with natural geological activity, like shifting underground rocks or high levels of mineral deposits in the soil. Basically, there's nothing paranormal about it. It's just nature doing its thing. Another argument brought up is the role of isolation and stress. Living on a remote ranch in the middle of the desert isn't exactly easy. It's quiet, it's lonely, and it can play tricks on your mind. Add in a few unexplained noises or lights, and it's not hard to see how someone might start to imagine something more sinister is going on. And let's not forget that John Edmonds didn't just keep his experiences to himself. He shared them widely. Skeptics suggest that once he started telling his story, it may have snowballed. Every new visitor to the ranch might have been primed to see or feel something unusual, simply because they'd already heard the stories. Then there's the elephant in the room: money. Critics argue that Stardust Ranch's fame has brought John Edmonds more than just attention. It's also brought financial opportunities. From interviews and book deals to selling the ranch itself, skeptics think there might be a financial motive behind some of the more sensational claims. I'll put a link to his book on his full experience if you're interested in that. Of course, this is a touchy subject. John has always maintained that his experiences are real, regardless of what others think. But for skeptics, the possibility of profit makes them question the authenticity of the story even more. Maybe there's a natural explanation for all of this. The lights in the sky could be aircraft, satellites, or even reflections from nearby towns. The strange sounds? Probably just the wind, animals, or shifting structures. Even the injuries that Joyce reportedly suffered have been questioned. Some skeptics suggest that they could be the result of mundane accidents or even unrelated medical issues. And what about those so-called shadow people? Some people think sleep paralysis could be the culprit. It's a well-documented phenomenon where people wake up unable to move and sometimes hallucinate dark, humanoid figures in the room. Combine that with the already tense atmosphere of the ranch, and it's easy to see how such experiences could feel all too real. Despite the skeptics' efforts to debunk the claims, there's something about Stardust Ranch that continues to fascinate people. Maybe it's the sheer number of stories, the emotional intensity of John and Joyce's accounts, or the way the ranch seems to fit into a larger pattern of mysterious locations like Skinwalker Ranch. After listening to John Edmonds' story on the forces at the ranch, personally, I don't buy it. But that's just my opinion, and I could be wrong. And the reason I don't buy it is because of a lack of proof, even if it's in the form of a blurry picture. But we have nothing, and I just have to take their word for it. His story sounds very convincing, but I just think there were several chances to capture some sort of evidence, even if it was blurry and small. But unfortunately, we don't have that. All we get are witnesses of husband and wife and a few unanimous visitors. However, John Edmonds had one final warning about the property.
Please be very well grounded because the energy here has a tendency to manifest whatever's going on with you.
But if you think Stardust Ranch is strange, just wait. A few hundred miles away, Skinwalker Ranch cranks the bizarre up to a whole new level. This remote property in Utah has been called the strangest place on Earth for a reason. People claim to have witnessed glowing orbs, unexplained disappearances, and even creatures that defy logic. Now, this one has proof. Enough proof that it got the attention of the US government to investigate it. It's not just ghost stories or campfire tales. This place has drawn scientists, investigators, and the US government to try to make sense of the chaos. But the more they study, the more they're left scratching their heads. Click this video to find out how the mystery ends.